Most people are shocked when I tell them that some of the foods they eat every single day could be fueling their joint pain. I'm not talking about obvious junk food, greasy fast food, soda, or candy. We all know those aren't good for us. I'm talking about foods that seem harmless, even healthy. But in certain people, they can quietly increase inflammation in the body. Inflammation is the root cause of most joint pain, whether you have arthritis, an old injury, or simply wear and tear from years of living. When inflammation is constantly triggered, your joints become swollen, stiff, and achy, and the damage slowly builds over time. If you've ever woken up sore without doing anything physically demanding the day before, your diet could be part of the reason. Let's start with the first culprit, refined sugars. These don't just come from candy bars or desserts. They hide in breakfast cereals, flavored yogurts, coffee drinks, energy bars, and even some healthy granolas. Sugar spikes your blood glucose, which triggers the release of inflammatory chemicals like cytokines. Over time, this creates a constant low-level fire in your body, making it harder for your joints to recover from everyday stress. I've seen patients cut back on sugar for just a month and report that their morning stiffness dropped by half. If you want to test this for yourself, start by reading labels. You'll be amazed at how many products contain added sugars under names like evaporated cane juice, malt syrup, or fructose. But here's where it gets tricky. Not all sugar comes from obvious sources. Many people load up on fruit juices thinking they're healthy, but these are often just concentrated sugar without the fiber that slows absorption. That rapid spike in blood sugar can be just as inflammatory as soda. Even too much honey or agave can have a similar effect if you consume it daily in large amounts. I recommend sticking to whole fruits instead of juices, and keeping sweet treats as an occasional pleasure rather than an everyday habit. Remember, the goal isn't to punish yourself, it's to give your joints a calmer, more healing environment. One of the ways I help my patients transition off high-sugar diets is by focusing on swaps rather than restrictions. Instead of sweetened yogurt, try plain yogurt with fresh berries. Replace soda with sparkling water flavored with a squeeze of lemon or lime. If you love baking, experiment with recipes that use mashed bananas or unsweetened applesauce for sweetness. This isn't about perfection, it's about lowering the inflammatory load little by little so your joints can start to heal. I've seen people make small changes and feel big differences in just a few weeks. The other thing to understand is that sugar doesn't just affect your joints directly, it also impacts your weight, and every extra pound puts extra strain on your knees, hips, and spine. Even a modest weight loss of 5 and 7 pounds can reduce joint pain significantly, especially in weight-bearing joints. Cutting back on added sugar is one of the easiest ways to get there without feeling like you're on a diet. And when you combine that with gentle daily movement, the improvement can be surprisingly fast. The bottom line, sugar is not evil, but too much of it, especially hidden sugar, is like adding fuel to the fire when it comes to joint pain. Another food that often surprises people when we talk about joint pain is certain vegetable oils. They sound harmless because, well, they come from plants, right? But oils like corn oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, and even some generic vegetable oil blends are extremely high in omega-6 fatty acids. Now, omega-6 is not inherently bad. Your body needs it in small amounts. But the problem is that the modern diet contains far too much of it compared to omega-3s. When omega-6 dominate, they promote the production of inflammatory chemicals that can worsen pain, swelling, and stiffness in the joints. Over decades, I've seen countless patients switch their cooking oils and notice real changes in their pain levels within just a month or two. The imbalance between omega-6 and omega-3 is one of the quiet drivers of chronic inflammation. Traditionally, humans ate close to a 1.1 ratio of these fats, but now in many Western diets, the ratio can be as high as 15.1. That's 15 times more omega-6 than omega-3. This shift pushes the body into a more inflammatory state, which can make arthritis symptoms flare and slow recovery from even small injuries. If you're cooking with vegetable oils every day, frying food, or eating packaged snacks like chips and crackers, you're likely getting more omega-6 than your body can handle. This doesn't mean you need to cut out all fats, it means you need to choose the right ones. So what should you use instead? For cooking at higher temperatures, avocado oil or light olive oil is a good choice because they're stable and don't break down as easily into harmful compounds. For salads or finishing a dish, extra virgin olive oil or flaxseed oil can add healthy fats without pushing inflammation higher. I also encourage my patients to increase omega-3 sources, like fatty fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel, at least twice a week. If you're plant-based, chia seeds, flax seeds, and walnuts are excellent options. These foods don't just help balance the omega ratio, they actively support joint lubrication and reduce stiffness. One patient of mine, Jim, was in his mid-50s and had struggled with chronic shoulder pain for years. He thought it was just part of aging, but when we reviewed his diet, I saw that almost all his cooking and most of his snacks involved refined vegetable oils. We switched him to olive oil for cooking, added a salmon dinner twice a week, and encouraged more nuts and seeds. Within 6 weeks, he reported that his range of motion improved and he could sleep without that dull, throbbing ache waking him up at night. It wasn't magic. It was simply reducing the inflammatory pressure his body was under. Of course, changing cooking oils is just one piece of the puzzle. You also need to look at where hidden oils are sneaking in. Packaged foods, restaurant meals, and even healthy snack bars often use cheap vegetable oils because they're inexpensive and have a long shelf life. Reading ingredient lists is one of the simplest and most empowering habits you can build. If you see soybean oil, corn oil, or sunflower oil near the top of the list, that product is likely going to tip your omega balance the wrong way. Choose products made with olive oil, coconut oil, or no added oils when possible. One of my favorite tips is to think of your kitchen as a joint health pharmacy. The oils you cook with, the foods you snack on, and the fats you consume daily all work like chemical messengers in your body. They can either whisper, heal, repair, calm, or shout swelling, pain, inflammation. You get to choose which message your body hears most often. And when you make that choice consciously, your joints often respond with less pain, more flexibility, and a better quality of life. There's one more food group that catches people off guard when we talk about joint pain: dairy products. Now, I'm not here to tell you that all dairy is bad. For many people, it's a perfectly healthy part of the diet. But for a surprising number of my patients, dairy can act as a trigger for inflammation, especially in those who have underlying sensitivities. The proteins in dairy, particularly casein and whey, can sometimes irritate the immune system in ways that worsen joint swelling and stiffness. I've seen patients who felt perfectly fine after eating cheese or yogurt for years, only to develop pain and inflammation later in life as their tolerance changed. Our bodies evolve over time, and what was once harmless can suddenly become a problem. The link between dairy and joint pain often comes down to immune response. In some individuals, the body reacts to dairy proteins as if they're foreign invaders, producing inflammatory chemicals to fight them. This doesn't happen to everyone, which is why dairy can be perfectly fine for some and troublesome for others. But when it does happen, the inflammation isn't always limited to the gut. It can spread systemically, affecting joints, skin, and even energy levels. That's why, when a patient comes in with unexplained joint flare-ups, one of the first dietary experiments I suggest is a short-term dairy elimination. It's not forever, just 2 to 4 weeks to see if symptoms improve. The difference this can make is sometimes dramatic. I remember a woman in her 60s who came to me with chronic knee pain that had been diagnosed as mild osteoarthritis. She was taking medication, doing physical therapy and staying active, but the pain never fully let up. We decided to try removing all dairy, milk, cheese, yogurt, butter, for just 3 weeks. By the end of that time, she told me she could climb stairs without wincing for the first time in years. Now, that doesn't mean everyone will have the same result, but it was clear that for her, dairy was a silent aggravator. If you suspect dairy might be an issue for you, the key is to approach it as a gentle experiment. Remove it entirely for a few weeks and pay close attention to your pain levels, stiffness in the mornings, and how your joints feel after activity. If you notice a big improvement, you can try reintroducing small amounts to confirm whether it's truly the trigger. I always tell patients to keep a simple food and symptom journal during this process. It makes patterns much easier to see. For those who want or need to cut back on dairy, there are plenty of alternatives that still provide the nutrients your body needs. Almond milk, oat milk, and coconut yogurt are widely available, and many are fortified with calcium and vitamin D. Nutritional yeast can provide a cheesy flavor without dairy, and fortified plant-based drinks can help you meet your calcium needs. Just remember to choose unsweetened versions to avoid adding unnecessary sugar into the mix. Otherwise, you might swap one inflammation trigger for another. Ultimately, the goal isn't to demonize dairy, it's to become more aware of how your body reacts to it. Some people thrive on it, others struggle. What matters is identifying your triggers and making adjustments that work for your lifestyle. By doing so, you take control over one more piece of the inflammation puzzle, and every small piece matters when it comes to protecting your joints for the long run. One thing I've learned over the years is that the foods that trigger joint pain are not always the ones people expect. Sometimes it's not about a single bad ingredient, but about how certain foods interact with your body's unique chemistry. For example, processed meats, things like sausages, bacon, deli slices, and hot dogs, can be especially tough on the joints. They contain compounds called advanced glycation end products, AGEs, and high levels of preservatives like nitrates and nitrites. These substances promote oxidative stress and inflammation, both of which can accelerate cartilage breakdown. Even if you don't eat them every day, regular consumption can keep your body in a constant low-grade inflammatory state. I remember a patient named Robert, who was in his early 70s and very active. He still played tennis twice a week, but he kept getting this deep, nagging ache in his hips and wrists. He swore he was eating pretty healthy, but when we looked closely, I noticed he had a habit of eating deli turkey or ham almost every day for lunch. It wasn't huge portions, but it was consistent. We swapped those for grilled chicken, canned tuna and water, or fresh-cooked lean beef. Within a month, Robert told me his pain had eased so much that he could play longer without discomfort. It wasn't magic. It was simply removing a constant inflammatory source. One of the challenges with processed meats is that they are convenient. They're quick, they taste good, and they feel satisfying. That's why, instead of just saying stop eating them, I help my patients find easy, realistic alternatives. Pre-cooked chicken breast strips, boiled eggs, or even roasted chickpeas can replace those deli slices in a sandwich or salad. The trick is to prepare a few protein options ahead of time so you're not tempted to grab whatever's most convenient when you're hungry. Because when pain is the price for convenience, it's not really worth it. Processed meats also often contain high amounts of salt, and for people with joint issues, excess sodium can make swelling worse. When your body holds on to extra fluid, the tissues around your joints can become puffier and more tender, increasing discomfort. This is especially true if you already have arthritis or any kind of chronic joint inflammation. Cutting down on salty, processed foods can sometimes bring noticeable relief in just a week or two. If you've ever had a ring feel tighter or your shoes feel snug after a salty meal, you've experienced this effect. It's worth mentioning that you don't have to eliminate a food forever to see benefits. Sometimes, just reducing your intake to occasional treats instead of daily staples can make a big difference. I often suggest that patients reserve processed meats for special occasions, maybe a weekend breakfast or a holiday meal, rather than part of their everyday diet. That way, they still enjoy the flavor without paying the price in joint stiffness and pain. At the end of the day, the key is to be mindful of what you eat consistently. A single meal won't ruin your joints, but the patterns you repeat daily can quietly set the stage for either healing or harm. By swapping out a few high-inflammatory foods for cleaner, more nourishing options, you give your joints the space they need to recover and function better. Over time, these small, thoughtful choices add up to real, lasting relief. Another food group I often see causing trouble for my patients is refined grains. I know that might sound disappointing if you love bread, pasta, and baked goods, but hear me out. Refined grains like white bread, white pasta, pastries, and many breakfast cereals have been stripped of most of their fiber and nutrients. What you're left with is a food that quickly breaks down into sugar in your body, spiking blood glucose and, in turn, inflammation. It's a similar effect to eating sweets, but people rarely connect their morning toast or bowl of cereal to their knee pain. Over time, these repeated spikes can keep your body in a state of low-grade inflammation that makes joint discomfort worse. I had a patient named Linda in her late 50s who came to me frustrated because she was doing everything right, exercising, stretching, and even taking supplements, but her hip and hand pain just wouldn't go away. When we reviewed her diet, she was shocked to realize that most of her meals included refined grains: toast at breakfast, a sandwich at lunch, pasta for dinner. I asked her to try replacing at least half of those servings with whole grain versions: whole wheat bread, brown rice, quinoa, and oats. 3 weeks later, she told me the constant ache in her hands had eased to the point where she could knit again without stopping every few minutes to shake them out. Refined grains can also contribute to weight gain because they digest so quickly, leaving you hungry again soon after eating. Extra weight, as I've said before, puts additional stress on your joints, especially your knees, hips, and lower back. Even a small amount of weight loss can make a big difference in pain levels, and reducing refined grains is one of the easiest ways to get there without feeling deprived. You still get to enjoy carbs, but you choose ones that are more nourishing and less inflammatory. Now, I'm not suggesting you need to avoid bread or pasta forever. The goal is to make better swaps most of the time. Whole wheat bread, brown rice pasta, steel-cut oats, barley, and buckwheat are all great alternatives. They digest more slowly, keep your blood sugar steady, and provide fiber that supports gut health. And a healthy gut can also mean healthier joints. Your gut microbiome plays a big role in inflammation levels throughout the body, and feeding it well can reduce pain in surprising ways. One tip I give my patients is to build meals around protein, healthy fats, and vegetables first, then add whole grains in smaller portions. This balance keeps blood sugar stable and helps prevent the big spikes that drive inflammation. For example, instead of a huge plate of pasta, have a smaller serving alongside grilled chicken, olive oil drizzled vegetables, and a salad. You still get the comfort of the carbs, but in a way that supports your joints rather than stressing them. It's also worth noting that some people are sensitive to gluten, even if they don't have celiac disease. For these individuals, gluten-containing grains like wheat, barley, and rye can trigger inflammation that affects not just the digestive system, but also the joints. If you've tried everything else and still struggle with joint pain, it may be worth experimenting with a short-term gluten elimination to see how your body responds. The key is to observe and listen to your own body's signals. They're often more accurate than any lab test when it comes to food sensitivities. When we talk about foods that can make joint pain worse, we can't ignore the role of highly processed snack foods. Chips, crackers, packaged cookies, instant noodles, and many frozen convenience meals often combine several inflammation triggers in one: refined grains, added sugars, unhealthy oils, and excessive salt. They're designed to taste addictive, keep for months on a shelf, and be easy to grab. But what they do inside the body is far from harmless. These foods send a constant stream of inflammatory signals, burden the liver, and keep your blood sugar and omega balance working against you. For someone already dealing with arthritis or chronic joint discomfort, that's like adding weight to an already overloaded bridge. I had a patient, Martin, in his mid-60s, who lived alone and relied heavily on packaged snacks for convenience. He didn't think it was a big deal because he wasn't overeating, just having a little something between meals. But when we added it all up, he was getting a steady drip of unhealthy fats, preservatives, and excess sodium every day. We worked together to replace most of his snacks with fresh fruit, nuts, Greek yogurt, and roasted chickpeas. Within a month, he noticed not just less joint pain, but also more energy and better sleep. He told me it felt like his whole body was quieter, not just his knees. One of the problems with processed snacks is that they don't support healing. They provide calories but very few nutrients your joints actually need, like vitamin C and D, magnesium, and antioxidants. Your cartilage, tendons, and ligaments all rely on a steady supply of these nutrients to repair and stay strong. When most of your calories come from foods that are nutrient-poor and inflammation-rich, your joints are left without the tools they need to maintain themselves. Over time, this gap shows up as more stiffness, slower recovery after activity, and more frequent flare-ups. The good news is that replacing these foods doesn't mean giving up on convenience. I always tell patients to think ahead. Keep healthy, ready-to-eat options in the fridge and pantry. Sliced vegetables with hummus, boiled eggs, unsalted nuts, fresh berries, or even pre-cut cheese, if dairy isn't an issue for you, can satisfy hunger without feeding inflammation. If you like something crunchy, try air-popped popcorn or roasted pumpkin seeds. The goal is to make the healthier choice just as easy as grabbing a bag of chips. I also recommend taking a mindful approach to eating, especially for those moments when you just want a little treat. Ask yourself, am I truly hungry or am I tired, stressed, or bored? Many people find that their snacking habits are more about habit and emotion than physical hunger. If that's the case, try addressing the feeling. Take a short walk, drink a glass of water, or call a friend before automatically reaching for food. This not only helps your joints but also supports overall health and well being. In the end, the foods you eat every day act like messages to your body. Some foods tell your body to calm down, repair, and restore. Others tell it to stay on high alert, inflamed, and reactive. The more you choose the first kind, the better your joints will feel, and the longer they'll stay healthy and mobile. My advice is to take small, consistent steps. Swap one snack, change one oil, cut back on one source of sugar. Over weeks and months, these changes add up to less pain, more freedom of movement, and a better quality of life. And that, to me, is worth every mindful choice you make.